Every little kid finds some kind of interest to latch onto when they're young, whether that be a book series that they enjoy or a movie that has grasped their attention. What often happens with children, however, is this interest often goes farther and becomes something of an obsession for them. For a much younger me, that obsession was with knights, swords, and all things fantasy. As I was homeschooled, this obsession was allowed to grow through my own study, and I even attended medieval festivals and other related events at a very young age. Perhaps it was a bit much for my poor mother, who was forced to put up with an 8-year-old who asked for a sword every other week. As time passed, I grew out of this to an extent. It was less growing out of it and more realizing that interests didn't necessarily have to be obsessions. It was still a really prominent thing in my life, it just faded more into a background trait than a true obsession. Especially going into high school when you realize that owning a sword doesn't necessarily make you cool, just kind of weird, but that never stopped me from buying more of them. Knowing this, you can imagine my excitement when I was walking through the mall the other day and came across a flyer for the Northeast Armored Sports Championship. Now, I had seen videos of night fighting events like these, where people wearing period-accurate armor fight on teams using dulled weapons, in a simulation of what an actual battle with these tools would have been. However, living in such a remote area of Maine, I had no access to go and see anything of the sort. This flyer, however, leaves one with far more questions than answers. Who are the teams participating in the event? What kind of people are under these armor, and why did they decide to start fighting? I think there's only one good way to find out. But first, I have one more stop to make. Champlain College's Hearthlight Club, a club dedicated to mock swordplay and fighting sports, just like the championship nights.
Hello, I'm Conrad, and I'm the head of the Champlain Hearthlight Club. What we do is, well, we fight each other with foam swords, but we make sure that we're doing it in a way that allows any student to come down and practice with us, have fun with us, and do whatever, kind of make sure that's an opening environment for it. We teach teamwork, we teach mostly accurate swordplay. Some of them we don't do because we want to be safe at the end of the day with what we do. And we will teach people basically any piece of equipment that we have will be taught to people at any point during your time here. And you also get to make your own at some point during the semester when you show up. You get to make it and you get to keep it, and it's all yours. And that's kind of what we do.
In fact, they were already in the process of making their own swords and shields, just in the time that I was there. As cool and awesome as the Champlain Hearthlight Club is, it's time to move on to the main event. For such a unique event, I didn't expect such a turnout, but it seems like people are genuinely really excited to see it, and believe me, so am I. This is like a childhood dream come true. The organizers were even kind enough to set me up with an interview with the captain of the Huntsman, which is one of the two teams that'll be fighting today. Alright, so what's your name again?
I'm Chuck.
Nice to meet you, Chuck. I'm Mark.
Good to meet you, Mark.
And you are the team captain for what team?
For the Huntsman.
The Huntsman, okay. So what are your roles as a team captain? What kind of do you fulfill in the team?
Besides being out there fighting, I have to manage who do I send in for the duels and at what time do I send them in, because I don't want to wear everybody out so we don't have enough healthy bodies for the melees at the end of the quarter. So it's more about time and personnel management.
Okay, and you mentioned duels and melees, so how are these events set up within the competition?
So there's 3 types of fights. There's duels, night fights, and melees. Duels and night fights are both one-on-one, they're just scored differently. Duels are about skill, the guy that lands the most weapon strikes wins the round, most rounds wins the match. Night fight, it's a little bit more subjective, it's like boxing, 10-point must system, anything goes, weapon strikes, kicks, punches, throws. Then you got your melees, which are my personal favorite, and that's when you've got multiple people on each team hammering away at each other, and a fighter is down when a third point of contact touches the ground. So hand, knee, elbow, you're done, you're out for the round. Team with the most fighters left standing at the end of the round wins.
Very cool. Where do you get your armor and equipment?
I actually bought this secondhand. When I joined the Knights Hall, they had a fighter recently retire who was close-ish to my size, so that's where I got it from. But you'd be surprised, there's lots of armors in Europe, Mexico, even in the States.
That's very cool. So what inspired you to start doing this?
So I was playing semi-pro football down in Massachusetts, and on our football forum, they showed a video of these guys in steel beating the bag out of each other. So I contacted the guy that posted the video and said, what is this and how do I do it? And I just happened to luck out. I live less than 30 miles from the Knights Hall, which is the premier training center in the Northeast for this sport. So put a call into Jay. They invited me up to go check it out. And 5 years later, I'm still fighting.
That's so cool. Well, thank you so much, Chuck.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Of course. After wishing Chuck good luck in his upcoming battles, I moved on to Marie, a referee and armorer who was hard at work checking all of the weapons to make sure that they were blunt enough for the competition, as to not cause unnecessary injuries.
This guy right here is a longsword. This isn't necessarily something you would take into a melee because it's not something that will do the job that you want it to do in a melee, but it is very, very good at picking up points in a one-on-one duel-like competition where that is how you win, is by points. And each weapon is used very differently, so I would use a longsword much differently than I would use something like an arming sword. Where this arming sword is one-handed, and I would typically have a shield over on this side, and I can just throw that out. A weapon like a longsword would be both my offense and my defense. So, for example, I could come in to attack you, and then also block my side right here as you come down to strike. We also have some really good examples of some melee weapons in here. Like this is a mace. Maces have very specific requirements, so you don't necessarily see them all the time. But this is typically something people would have as a sidearm that you can use to just crack whoever you're fighting. We also have a two-handed axe, which is easily the most popular weapon you will ever see. The majority of the time, especially considering like some teams, some folks, you will see nothing but like two straight lines of two-handed axes. And that is because they are devastating when you know how to use them properly. Let me see here. We also have a falchion, which is another one-handed weapon, but it's weighted in such a way that it's intended to be more damaging than the arming sword. So this, though it's a sword, and though you would think like, oh, you would just use that one-on-one, like you said earlier, right? No, this is specifically intended to be brought into a melee to do melee damage.
And with that, it's time for the fights to begin. What an incredible show. Something that I found personally fascinating was the level of sportsmanship displayed, how they take it so seriously, yet still have the compassion to hug or shake hands with the person that they just threw to the ground. That sportsmanship is what brings this otherwise intense and brutal sport full circle, and what makes it so approachable to someone like the Hearthlight Club, because in the end, it's less about beating people up and knocking them down, and more about having fun with it. And I think that's why it would be so fascinating to see the school work together with this organization for something like this. Because not only is it enjoyable to watch, but there's a lot of historical value with it too. That armor looks legitimately heavy, and it just goes to show how much difficult using it in the period that it was meant to be used would have been. After all is said and done, that was an incredible event and experience. and I greatly commend the teams participating for the wonderful, amazing show that they put on. And thank you so much to Vermont Gatherings for helping make this possible.